Frank Watson here with Tom Probasco, and Tom has something to say. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Frank. Um, I want to start off. I sort of prep for these things, I think I've mentioned, but it gets pretty rambling after a while, which is fine. Um,
They're
Frank,
not gonna they're not gonna dock our pay.
no, I don't think they are. I don't think we're likely to get fired, are we?
No,
So, you posted something on Facebook a few days ago.
yes,
Uh, the the core event was your sister Sue Jester's birthday.
right,
But your post began talking about marriage,
right,
well, your marriage to Barbara, and you
right.
mentioned something at the beginning of it about Fritz pearls. So you're a young guy, and I'm familiar to some degree with Fritz pearls. I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations.
Right,
You know how that goes. A lot
right.
of people listening to this, or whoever's listening, may not be aware, some may not. But you went on to say that changed. Would you? And then I also want you to also talk about later on in this brief essay. It really is a good essay. You talked about, you used the phrase prisoner of love. Would you
Yes,
care to expound on that post uh, with that little intro?
certainly. I love to expound. Sometimes I expound without even being asked.
Well,
Sometimes I'm asked to stop expounding.
I've had the same experience. Uh, it hasn't gotten better as I've gotten older. Julia, on occasion, will say kindly, Tom, you've said that before or something. Anyway,
yes. Well, I when I finally got the chance to do some college, I was introduced to some great writers, and I was quite a reader, and I still read, even though I have troubles doing so because of my eyesight. But uh, I find ways, and one of those writers was Fritz Perls, and a very enjoyable book, In and Out the Garbage House. Um, and and Fritz was kind of the father of Gestalt therapy, which had to do with processing feelings and and using your feelings to make sense of yourself and the world. So one of the things that he had said was, I am not in this world to live up to your expectations, and you're not in this world to live up to mine. If by chance we meet and agree, fine. If not, fine. Paraphrasing him.
yeah, yeah, no, I'm.
Uh,
It's a pretty familiar, yeah.
yeah, and uh, I had grown up. My dad loved family. His family of birth had been. Um, he'd had a lot of brothers. There was one sister that was shipped off when the mother of the boys was uh, put in a nursing home or some sort of a facility. She had had one too many children and had a breakdown. And the only way that the doctor could stop grandpa from making more babies is to put her in a facility. So this left the boys, the younger boys, on their own, especially when grandpa took on a housekeeper who had children and gave preference to her children. Now, I don't know what all the dynamics were, but I know that my dad and his younger brother ended up for a while being left in an abandoned house to kind of fend for themselves. They were Scotch Irish, and they were supposed to be independent. And it's my idea, it's my information that they were pretty daggone hungry when his older half brother and the second oldest, who was a full brother, uh, came and found them in this house. And the older half brother, uh, Ben, Alvin Ben Watson, uh, who had been a rodeo rider and uh, knew quite a bit about that life. Uh, he took the younger brother Arthur, and my uncle Leonard, who was Dad's half brother, took Dad. Now I don't know about Art and Alvin. Somewhere along the line, Alvin went to work for Eli and Lilly as a carpenter. Don't know much about that. Mostly, I knew Uncle Howard as a person who liked dogs, bird hunting, and whiskey. Uh, and the family had run whiskey for Granddad, who was a moonshiner, and Granddad also would buy uh, uh, boxcar loads of Western ponies who were unbroken, and the boys would break them. So this was a pretty tough crew, and uh, uh, Dad had gone off to World War II, and and you know, I just recently read the book on killing.
We talked about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I got some closure on Dad, and it was really a good thing to read Dad. I understand better now. Not everybody that went to war or even that had PTSD, I suppose, had uh, to kill somebody, and up close and personal. But all of those who did ended up with psychological problems. If you kill somebody, there's something in the human spirit that doesn't want to kill anybody. That killing is really something that goes against the grain. You fight, you give each other a couple of whacks on the head or something, uh, but you don't really go for the kill that much. Except in modern war, they're learning how to break down those that resistance and go ahead and
Yeah, that was part of that book. Yeah.
it was quite a book, and I really highly recommend it. Uh, on Killing by a fellow by the name of Grossman. And so, anyhow, uh, Dad had determined a couple of things. Uh, one of which was he was going to prepare me so that when I had to go to war, as he assumed I would, uh, assumed correctly in a way, uh, that I would be prepared to be a smart soldier. And he taught me things like don't volunteer. And he taught me obey orders. And my growing up was partly being uh, let run loose like he had been run loose. It was partly basic training all over again, and sometimes it was dealing with what he had experienced in World War II that got the best of him and made him lose his temper. And sometimes this was life threatening. Well, I uh, I loved family, but uh, I did not like being under orders. I did not like having to be held accountable by being whipped, and I had a very strong inclination to go my own way in everything I did. So this, and then with that kind of preparation, when I read Fritz Perls, that was really freeing. You know, no
Yeah.
commitment other than here I am, and this was not a really happy thing in terms of human relationships, and especially as it turned out, marriage. My first marriage was an utter failure, other than we had two wonderful boys. And
Yeah.
uh, and it took me a long time to really appreciate how unprepared we were for marriage. She had her story, I had my story, and we were miserable together for about 9 years. Uh, and there were some bright points, but not very many
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
So uh, after we had separated, she took the boys. I felt very strongly that she wanted to adopt the boys, and I had been responsible for the family. I had to work, and she had been raising the boys, but I was stuck with paying the bills, and the way it worked out, when we separated, she found a second husband that had a pretty good paycheck, and she wanted to adopt the boys, and I we made a deal that I got to see the boys, and she wanted them to have the same name as her, and I
Mhm.
wanted her to be comfortable. I wanted the boys to be comfortable, and so and I also I was in no condition to hold down a steady job at that point. I went through a lot of changes, a couple of relationships, and still trying to make this I'm in this world and blah 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 work. Didn't work. Didn't work very well. Uh,
Okay.
and so uh, after a couple of years, Barbara and I met. And Tom, it was like we had been in a class together when we both had been married. I had been married to my first wife, and she had been married to her first husband. And we didn't even talk outside the classroom. But a couple of years later, I had gone back to school. I was single, and I was going to go back, and I was going to get some more schooling. I like classes. The ones I liked, I really liked, and if I didn't like them, I just didn't go. I had the GI Bill. It was paying for the classes, and uh, I, my relationship with education was pretty much the same as it was with women, or anybody or anything else. I'm in this world, blah blah blah. I was. It's the same kind of the way my dad, who was the best woodsman I ever knew, tried to teach me how to walk softly and and carefully in the woods, and and it involved picking my feet up and setting them down slowly and carefully. This was not what I had read about in the books, where Indians glided through the woods, their feet just gliding. They didn't carefully pick, and looking back on it, it's embarrassing. But that's the kind of a guy I was. I was a reader. If I read it in a book, it was, by God, it was the truth. And so I was reading all this stuff that was popular at the time, and then I meet Barbara. We met in an elevator the day before her birthday,
I
and
remember that story. Yeah.
we 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 stepped into the elevator, and our eyes met, and we recognized each other. This
From
was
past.
we
Yeah.
the first class. The class that we had been a Spanish class
Mhm.
at IUPUI on East Michigan Street in the old CA building.
Mhm.
We met in the elevator of the new CA building on West Michigan Street,
Yeah.
first floor. And I was there that day for a Spanish class because I had flunked the first one. I'd sat in back of her, sketching the back of her head. She had beautiful hair, and I would much rather sketch the back of her head than take notes in Spanish.
Mhm.
And it just didn't come naturally to me. I got the accent right, but I couldn't conjugate the verbs. I just
Oh, that's murder.
so anyhow, uh, we in the course of the first floor to the second floor, uh, we managed to establish who we were by name, the fact that we were both uh, unattached, and that she had a 1 hour class on the second floor. And she got out on the second floor and looked back. And she always says, uh, uh, and about the first floor, about the meeting, she says, and we, exchanged information. And I said, I I had I had been in through a divorce, and it was traumatic, and pushed my glasses back up. Now I'm back. And she always does that little thing, pushing the glasses back. She does a great imitation of me, which is really flattering. Uh, and and uh, and I always comment that when she got out of the elevator to go to her class, her butt hit both sides of the elevator. Kaboom, kaboom. She looked back over her shoulder and smiled, and kaboom, kaboom. So I was waiting when she come out of the class,
I
and
just thought you were.
yeah, I was.
It
And
reminds me of a song, but go on. Yeah.
so I said, "Would you like to go have a cup of coffee?" And she said, "Why, yes, I would."
And the
So we went and
rest,
had a
as
cup
they
of coffee,
say, yeah.
and we made a date for coffee the next day, which was her birthday. Now, this is how I remember it. I know it was at this point in time. It was her birthday. She brought her 7-year-old son, who was named
Uh,
Christopher.
yeah.
It was the same age as my 7-year-old son, who was named Christopher.
Yeah.
On our first date on her birthday, and and we had coffee together. And then she went to a class, and the child went with me to the library,
Oh,
and we both enjoyed the library. He was really bright, like my own son was, and I really was. I missed the boys. I liked being a father. You know, I was not nearly as good at it as I thought maybe I was, but I was not making the mistakes that my father made, at
yeah.
least for the most part. Uh,
Right.
so their lives were not endangered by me.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and uh, on that second day, on her birthday, she was 39 years old, smoking hot. She was a good-looking woman with 7 children, and
Oh.
I was nuttier than it could be because I did not even bother worrying about 7 children. I should have had deep concern. But honestly, I felt like it was just uh, that it was something that was supposed to be. There was a feeling of sureness.
So
And
that was your movement away from Fritz Pearls to,
that took years.
well, and yeah, and then you later in that, uh, in that essay, you talked about the marriage became more of what you called a Christian marriage.
Absolutely.
And so that I assumed that you meant that stood in contrast to the Fritz Perls, I am not in this world.
Yeah, well, we both had been through marriages that we had been very unhappy, at least at the end of our marriage.
Yeah,
I think she had a better start in marriage than I did. I'm married. I was like 20 years old, and
yeah,
in the Air Force. I should, I I had in King Salmon, Alaska. I had worked a lot of KP for other people, and for money, and sent the money home, and uh, expecting to have a start. When we got married and went to my next duty station, which was in Bangor, Maine. I, I didn't read closely enough when they showed me the stations, and I thought it said Bangor, Missouri, which would have been a much warmer climate
oh yeah,
after Alaska. But I ended up in Bangor, Maine.
yeah,
But when I got home, uh, bless her heart, it was a big family, and her father had been deployed. We were going, he was in France, I think, and she said they had been short on money, and she had shared that money with her mother, which left us pretty daggone short.
yeah.
So that was not a good start,
Mhm.
and I didn't hold it against her, but I didn't have the money to do what I needed to do. I had to pick up to keep from starving and to pay the rent. I ended up after I got settled a little bit, picking up work bagging groceries for tips at the PX uh, to make ends meet, and it was a military town. She was unable to find decent employment. She didn't have any particular skills. She was a recent high school graduate, so we just damn near starved.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we both were kind of, you know, independent and yada yada. Uh, but we ended up having one child there and another one when we left the Air Force. So,
So now you're on your way to, I'm still interested in that phrase, prisoner of love, both
well, in
both
the
in both
process,
families.
yeah, in the process of spiritual growth, I had left behind the I'm in this world, you are in this world. Barbara wasn't having push came to shove. Her values really didn't support that. She had been in an unhappy marriage, and she wanted to establish some ownership of me.
Is
Uh,
it related to commitment?
yeah, related to we're in this. I own you, you own me, and she it made her feel safe. And
Yeah.
Tom, that's realistic.
Mhm.
You want somebody that's going to come home, that's going to make sure that there's no odd or unwelcome people hanging around or intruding in the home life. You want to make sure that the kids are in the neighborhood doing what they're supposed to be and not doing what they're not supposed to be. There's a whole lot of ways that uh, uh, proper relationship involves ownership.
And somehow
Not,
this relates to the Christian, because I'm
yes,
interested in how you pulled that in. Now, I know you'd had the Presbyterian background for a long time, and Barbara also, was she had any association with
she had grown up in the Methodist church.
Method? Okay,
She
yeah.
became a Catholic when she married, and
Oh, okay.
been raising her children as Catholic until recently. Um, and I had begun attending Westminster Presbyterian Church.
Oh, okay. That brings
It
in
was a small Presbyterian church, inner city. They were heavily committed to the neighborhood.
yeah. Oh,
Uh, they started lots of programs uh, for benefiting neighborhood people, and they were they were like a mission that the larger Presbyterian Church after a while disowned. They had the programs, they didn't need the mission anymore. So Westminster closed. But we were married there,
Mhm.
and uh, we wrote our own vows.
Mhm.
Our vows consisted of we are in this world. No, no, that was Fritz Perls.
Yeah.
We we are in a relationship which we wish to continue and call marriage. That was the extent of our vows. And
Yeah.
you should have seen and heard the happy dance that the minister Gary Cornell did around that.
Yeah. So that's interesting because now we've moved away from at least most people's perception of Fritz Perls and his outlook to, as you said, really that church's uh, commitment to the community. So it was about commitment to those outside the pair of you.
Yeah, yeah.
You continued that for decades.
Well, and there was commitment to each other, but it wasn't the open and strong and powerful commitment that says, and the two shall become one.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
We still had that distance,
Hmm.
and you
Initially,
know,
yeah.
um,
And does that mean that you were then moving toward, I'm still thinking of the essay you posted, toward this, an interesting phrase, prisoner of love in both families. You said if you hadn't shown up at Sue's uh, party, you don't get out a lot anymore. So you were pretty much committed to attending that. I think you had to go to Franklin.
yeah, yeah,
So all of this sort of ties together. That's why I was interested in
yeah.
some of this
I
expounding.
I still today to this day, when I celebrated my birthday at Sycamore Reserve,
Yeah.
had the greatest daggone birthday party, but it was I made it clear to everybody, this is not, you can attend if you want to. I'd be happy to see you. But if you don't, God love you. Have a great day.
Yeah, you had that difference,
Yes.
not taking prisoners, and yet the prisoner word is not, there's a difference
Well,
between
let me
your
let me tell you, let me tell you what happened with
okay.
my birthday.
Yeah.
My sister and her daughter that she lives with showed up. They not only came, they provided refreshments. It was like you belong to us, and you're not having a stinking birthday party that doesn't have refreshments, and we're going to see to it because yeah, they were saying you're part of our tribe. We're not gonna let people think that we are going letting our brother and uncle have a birthday party that's poor mouth.
Yeah, poor
And
mouth.
and you know what? They loved me and they loved my friends. And and there is that thing about tribal society. And we are living uh, the election that we just had was tribal.
Mhm.
It was
To some extent, yeah.
well, to some extent, Tom, that's the roots of it. That's
Yeah, I
that's
kind
the
of see,
roots of it.
yeah. I well,
It was not. It was certainly not. It was certainly not.
on one side, yes.
It was certainly not rational.
No, and that's what I'm talking
And
about.
and Tom,
There's
you
such
know,
divisions that I can see that on on one side.
if you don't
And to
think,
some extent the other, but they're different to some degree.
well, of course they're different, but
Yeah.
it's still tribal.
But I'm interested in normally you think, I'm trying to stay focused on your essay, this prisoner, normally that's a negative word, but you're pointing out where it's not entirely negative.
Oh, absolutely not.
Right.
Absolutely not.
Right.
The thing is, in terms of spirituality, for one thing, Christian love is not the same thing as the love that existed, for instance, in this country at the time of the Revolution.
Mhm.
Uh, the British law uh, saw women and children as property. They were owned by a woman was owned by her father. This is the laws of coverture. She was owned by her father until she married, at which point she was owned by her children or her husband,
Husband. Yeah.
and the children were owned by the husband until they married.
This occurs just real quickly in a lot of Appalachian songs. I'm hearing as you were saying that, I'm hearing one that a particular song, uh, you know, that says exactly, that phrase says exactly what you just said. It's in one of the Cosaway, it's sung other places. The Cosaway Sisters, one of that album that I've
Yeah,
got, like Bowling Green. It has that clearly in there.
absolutely. Well, if you look at the Old Testament, which is the roots of our faith, you find the Bible says uh, a good wife is worth more than diamonds and rubies. You know, it's not something to be dismissed as just another uh, piece of property. The Bible says when a man and a woman marry, the two shall become one.
Yeah, you were saying that
So,
earlier. Yeah.
so she has ownership as well as he has ownership.
And that
Now,
was in
the
your
two are
post. Yeah.
one. It
Yeah.
doesn't say I am in this world to do my thing and you're in this world to do
No, no.
it.
Okay. So that's where you're getting the Christian the foundations of that. Yeah.
And it says the man shall leave his mother and father. If there's a point in the Old Testament where was it uh, the I forget the guy the name of pro, the primary person who sent his servant to his family in another part of the country to find him a wife, and and the deal was he was supposed to uh, go to the well, and when a woman, a young girl, came out and offered him water for his camel, he would uh, see if ask for her to be the bride of his master, and all this took place, and he gave her presents, and she took him home, and they established the relationship, and asked for the girl's hand in marriage. And the brothers considered this, and the family considered it, and they said, well, let's see what she has to say about this.
Mhm.
And they were living in her mother's house. This was not patriarchy. This was more like matriarchy.
Uh,
And, and she made the decision, yes, she would go, she would return and be the wife. But there's an element of matriarchy in the Jewish faith. And when Jesus came upon the scene, uh, he said, if a man divorces a woman for any reason besides sexual infidelity, he causes her to commit adultery. In other words, at the time, there was discussion among the rabbis as to what constituted grounds for divorce. And Jesus put his foot down. And the reason that he put his foot down is because, according to the way that the rules broke down, if if she got divorced, she was really not, she was a scandal at home.
Yeah.
If she went home to her parents, she was not valued. She
She
had no
lost.
way to sustain herself.
Yeah.
This was not right, and this was not what God intended. And what he intended was, and the two shall become one. So we didn't have any idea of all that when Barbara and I stood up in that church, but it was a church, and I think God was just laughing his godly ass off, if you want to know the truth, because we got married in that church and we proceeded to become one. It took years,
Yeah. Well, and
and
you know,
we had some trauma along the way because we both had trauma from other places to work through, which
yeah,
affected our lives. It wasn't just our attitude, it was like we were trying to come to grips. I was trying to come to grips with dad. She had lost her father at a very early, at when she was a young mother.
yeah,
She really loved her father, and her father was a really great man. He was a fine man, and and then her marriage, her first marriage, uh, her her choice of a husband. He was older. They had met. He had a job as a butcher. He was working for Kroger,
hmm,
but he had graduated from college in theater, and her father was in the furniture business and got him started in the furniture business. He turned out to be a tremendous salesman and a really powerful drinker.
and that's where the trauma
That's
thing.
where it really went south.
Yeah,
Uh, Barbara is a strong person, and she's not going to put up with bull, And it came down to it. She said, "This is it." But he was the one that decided he was going to leave, and he made a big deal out of leaving. And when the kids didn't all, die because Dad had left, and he wanted to come back, she had already shut the door. Nope.
yeah,
So she was available. I was available. We both were coming out of traumatic relationships. We were both trying to sort out who we are. But uh, in the process of really continuing to develop as Christians and as spiritual people, as well as a couple, you know, we um, uh, we have come to the point where here we are. I'm 80. I'll be 81 in February, and she just turned 89 in September. She's got memory issues. Sometimes if the weather hits me just right, I can't hardly walk. Uh, I've had heart trouble. I've had cancer, and we're hanging out with each other, and we love every single day that we have together. Uh,
yeah,
you know, she needs me for memory support, and Tom, when she wakes up, I like to be there. She wakes up about 11 o'clock. So when we're done here, I'm
yeah.
shutting down the computer and I'm going back and making her a cup of coffee. Now
Yeah.
I've got another video coming up with a chaplain from veterans, and
Oh,
I'd gone through some of the psych people at VA, and they were helpful. VA is They know how to treat a veteran. Lots of respect. I had not really thought about the fact that I had done anything special. It was a job. I spent 4 years. I suffered. 3 days, swings, three midnight shifts, and 72 hours off for 4 years in the rain and the snow,
Yeah, I
heat,
do
the
remember you
heat of
mentioning
summer.
that. Yeah,
And that was my 4 years, and starving to death unless I worked a second job.
yeah,
I hadn't really thought of it. It was just what you did.
right.
I grew up not expecting a whole lot out of life, and I didn't get much. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
but I survived and went on. But in the process, I got an education. I learned a lot, and I got as I learned that over time that if you serve in the military, you've done something special because the military is a beast. Think how big it is.
yeah,
And when you go in, you sign that paper. Your life's not yours until your enlistment's up.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. You have a yeah, definitely.
you're
Uh,
under orders.
yeah,
I
and
almost I almost shot a captain one night. He was a pilot up in Alaska because I was under orders. Anybody that approached the alert hangar had to be challenged, and they had to give the password.
oh
And
dear.
if they didn't give the password, they weren't not to proceed any further. And he started to proceed, and I put a round in the chamber, and I gave him one more halt, and he cussed and gave me the password. And
Well, he had it and he wasn't going to give it to you.
he'd been drinking at the officers
Oh,
club.
good old booze.
Yeah. And he was a pilot. He was a cowboy.
And
He
that
was
could have got
privileged.
him, and that could have gotten him killed.
I was a good shot.
Yeah, well, and you
He would have
had
been
your
dead.
yeah,
And I would have not, it would have cost me. Not
yeah,
only would have
trauma
cost
that.
me to not just to just pull a trigger on somebody. That's a horrible thing to do.
Oh yeah. Well, and
No,
here it is. I think, just to think about the potential,
but would the
wasn't even
military
an enemy.
would the military have been happy with me following orders? In a way, yes, but I would not have been. I would not have been a very popular person.
Right. Yeah,
And
that's the quandary of a lot of this stuff.
and you know what? That's the bind that you're in the military, and especially if you're in security forces. You've got orders,
Right.
and sometimes
It
there
goes
is no such
way against the grain.
there is no such thing as common sense. You've got orders.
Yeah.
You live that way for the term of your enlistment.
Right.
Look at the people at My Lai in Vietnam.
Right.
They were told to kill a village full of women and children. Oh my God,
Yeah.
what a horrible thing. If you've been in the military, I respect you. If you go to VA, I respect you. And the people at VA, they don't ask it. They don't ask to see your medals. If you're there because you were in the military, you get respect.
Yeah.
And when I came home, it was like nobody even noticed I'd been gone.
Yeah.
There wasn't any parade, and the old units back in World War II, they came back from battle. They would come by ship.
Yeah.
They had time as a unit, as a group, to process what they'd been through.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
had friendships. A lot of them had friendships that they had formed in basic training,
Yeah.
stayed with them all through the war,
Yeah.
and all through the rest of their lives. They were,
And after. Yeah.
yeah.
And part of it was there wasn't an active conflict that you were involved in. So that was part of it, but it was also the time. As I think of the fact
Pat,
that not too long ago. Yeah,
Tom, I was on Operation Chrome Dome. It was conflict, all right, but it was cold.
Well, that's what I mean. It wasn't there were two different things. You weren't coming out of the front line in Europe or
Right,
wherever.
right.
But then there's also the thing that happened in that time period. Is,
With the lead into the Russians,
well, what I'm thinking of is the attitude of the public
yeah,
toward returning soldiers.
yeah.
They were spat on in some cases or ignored. And I was talking to a fellow that had been, this was not this past summer, but the summer before last. And he told me about his experiences. And he said, what I want to hear, what most of us want to hear is not thank you for your service, but welcome home.
Yeah.
So that's what your comments made me think of that conversation. This was over a year ago. I talked to somebody.
Well, in many ways, I'm just now feeling that welcome home myself. I went away to Alaska and I was stationed there for 15 months. I had to leave home when my father had a heart attack. But when I went away, I was young. I knew all the popular songs. I knew all the dances. I was connected with my generation. When I came back, it was all about the Beatles. When I left, it was Elvis. When I came
Oh,
back, it was the Beatles.
yeah.
And
And Elvis was still around, but they were a big
but
deal. Yeah.
and the girl I married, she was all about the Beatles.
Hmm. Yeah, funny the cultural things that enter.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd left home, went in the Air Force, and I never got to come home because home wasn't there. It wasn't the same anymore. So so
Yeah.
there was that added into the mix. And I did not want to be. I took one of the early versions of Police Academy. It was good training, and I was in IMPD was interested in me a little later on. I didn't want anything to do with. I didn't want to wrestle drunks. I
Oh, so you considered briefly that you might join the police force or no?
I
Something.
considered it very briefly. I ended up later after trying to work, do things. I never wanted to be a carpenter. My dad loved to build things and wanted me to follow in his footsteps.
Mhm.
And it was one way that I could rebel. I refused to learn. I was not good at it, just naturally.
Yeah.
But in addition, I didn't want to learn it. I,
Yeah.
I,
Well,
I
you're
did not
attracted to
want
what
to be
you're
a carpenter.
attracted to.
And
Yeah.
so I had laboring jobs and I was strong, but I never really wanted to. And there's something in me just would let me. Nope,
Yeah.
nope.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can carry the board, but you can't nail it.
Yeah.
Or you can't say where it goes or whatever.
Yeah. It
Uh,
takes a certain perception to be in construction, a 3D ability to see where things, and I don't have that really either. Little projects I
oh
might
yeah,
really, but you're talking.
pattern
It
recognition.
takes a, yeah, it takes a son Christopher is now becoming a very good carpenter. Um, I, didn't know he had that aptitude. I mean, I would show him how to use tools, hand
Yeah,
tools. Wasn't like I
yeah.
didn't use them at all, but I wasn't building anything much. But it turned out he's got that aptitude.
All of Barbara's kids have some aptitude
Yeah.
and for design, for how
Well,
things
you
work
think
together.
about Patrick, the printmaker. I mean, that
Patrick, the
takes
printmaker. Uh,
that takes ability to visualize and then transfer with one's hand to, I mean,
yep. The youngest son, who was the little boy that I met that first date with Barbara. He he's the one who cannot be named on Facebook or
he
social.
cannot be named.
No, I don't use his name.
Oh, because he doesn't want anything to do with
Yeah,
that.
yeah, he's very very
His-
careful about
that's his decision.
yes.
Okay.
But anyhow, he works. He's an artist who does works with web pages,
Oh,
and he's a very good painter.
yeah. See, I've never heard. I've heard about Patrick, obviously, but not
Oh
this
yeah,
fellow. So anyway, okay.
yeah, he's
Interesting.
very good. But he and his significant other uh, uh, have a really nice house that they are remodeling and doing amazing things with
Hmm.
because they both have an eye for design.
Yeah, well,
And then last night, it hit home right here in River City because my beloved stepdaughter, Carrie, ordered a couple of corner cabinets that she had to put together. And it was a project that took an extra set of hands. And I know very well how to be an extra set of hands.
yeah.
And I watched her put this stuff together and she would figure it out. And, every once in a while she'd get something backwards and then she'd look at it, undo it, and do it up. She wouldn't let me touch the screwdriver, Tom.
You were there
She's
to
hands on, you know,
hold things. Yeah. Well, I did
and
with daughter Lori. It's people who've got this or they don't. Just real quick. So she bought this. Julia and her. Julia and went and got a. It was a dresser. No, it was a bed, single size bed. It had two big drawers that slid under. And so it comes in a box from IKEA or somewhere. And so I take it, carry it into the bedroom and take it out of the box. And I said, and she looks at me and I don't know how old she was at this point. Not real. I mean, she wasn't high school, I don't think. She says, I'll put it together. And I thought, oh no. So I got the pieces. She said, just leave it lay there. Give me the directions. So I go do something else and I'm just waiting to have to go undo the mess. 30 minutes later, how are you doing? Fine. 20, 30 minutes later, I said, how you doing? I'm done. And I thought, oh my God. So I go in there and there it sits. Not an extra screw, not an extra part. Works, drawers pull out, drawers go. And I learned I didn't know that she had that ability. You just don't know until
yeah,
you get
yeah,
the evidence. And I was like, and I thought, and subsequently, anytime I get a hold, and it occasionally happens, partly eyesight, like you mentioned, uh, if she's here, I'll say, hey, you want to do this? Sure. I
yeah.
was trying to put new blades in a shaver. I couldn't. I thought I was getting ready to send it back. I thought it was the wrong part. She says, let me look at it. 5 minutes later, she's got this little song, hero, hero all the time. And damn thing fit right in there just right. I thought, good.
Yeah.
Doesn't bother me a bit that I can't do it. She can do it.
You
Uh,
know, my aptitude has more to do with music or writing, and
yeah,
particularly
well, that's why
writing.
we relate like we
Yeah,
do,
yeah. We're a couple of tap your foot and use words
Well,
people.
it's funny. So sometimes I'll tackle something I shouldn't. Other times I do, and it's like a brother-in-law, rest his soul, he would talk about going out. He said, Tom, his name was Tom too. He said there are days when these hands are golden, and he said then there's days when everything I touch turns to shit. And it's like, yeah, and it's hard to know when you start out which day it's going
You
to be.
don't know which day it is until you
You
get there,
don't
do you?
know until then it's like halfway, it's like, oh my God, or great, or it's like, oh, what was I thinking? You know. Um, but let me ask you, I don't know, you said at 11,
Yeah,
you got to go in. So do we have how much time?
we got it. We got a few minutes.
Let me, before we get too far away from some of the trauma
Yeah.
is things, we've mixed a lot in here as we always do. So Aaron Lip, we talked about this last week.
Yeah.
Uh, the terminally unique. Uh, he 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 really liked he really is interested in these videos we do, but he sent me, I got to get this stupid uh my Norton showed up there. I don't know what's done. Let me see if I can find this that Aaron sent me after he read it. Um, Let me find it. Aaron, where are you? I thought I had it pulled up. Um, he um, he also recommended. We've been in communication. We're getting to know each other, and he says, you know what I think you ought to do. I handed him a set of these chat books, something to say chat books,
Yeah.
and he's liking them, and it's interesting. His comments of why he likes them are so similar to what others have said. But then he also said, you know what you ought to do? He said, you ought to put a Facebook post up every week about the same time with a poem. And I thought, really? And then I got to think about it. So I did it. And it's last I looked, I don't know, 17, 18 people had responded. Uh, so it's just interesting how he looks at things because he's a singer songwriter. And well, as you can, and he's similar to some others in that the lyrics are very close to standalone poems. As I read Secrets last
Yes.
week, and it includes that, that's the one that includes the line. Well, the whole album, terminally unique. Within the song Secrets, it talks about this young woman joining the sorority of the terminally unique,
Yeah.
which you know what that means. But he said to me later, he said several things. Um, I was asking him about, no, he just listened to, uh, let me find this. He read, okay, here it is. He said, watched, I sent him the link to last week. He said, watched most of this today. I think it's a great thing that you guys do. For what it's worth, and I thought I had mentioned this, but maybe not clearly enough. He said, for what it's worth, I originally heard the term terminal uniqueness from the world of recovery, which as I dug into it, I kind of knew that, but I didn't know it initially. But the meaning in the song is slightly different. I am referring to people dying because they resort to lethal vice as a way of ineffectively trying to deal with their perceived uniqueness.
Mm.
So lethal device could be drinking, it could be
Yeah.
other things.
Yeah.
And it's this whole concept of thinking to some degree, I may be not saying this exactly right, Aaron would know, uh, that I can't be helped because the rules don't apply to me. The rules of help because of my uniqueness.
Right.
Turns out it's, as we know, it's not. I mean, there's commonalities. I talked to Chris Webb about it last week, and he said, yeah, he said he was aware of the term. Now, uh, AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book, is kind of old school. It goes back to the 30s, I think. It doesn't have that term. So this is a concept that has arisen more recently. Um, but it's not always about addiction to chemicals, but there are other kinds of things that occur. In this young woman's case, it was a traumatic event
Hmm.
from a friend of her father's. Um, but I wanted to bring that up. Um, that's what after he watched us on this last week, he said he just wanted to bring that up again. I thought we had talked about that, but in any case, doesn't hurt to repeat it if I am repeating. I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm or not. So, um, real quickly, I because I know you want to go be one bar with Barbara. Terroresque, Chris Webb. I think I may have mentioned, but didn't explain quite enough. It was in the mid '90s, 1995.
Hmm.
Uh, Pat and Alan
Alan
and
Stratton
Chris,
and Pat Webb.
yeah, and they began at some point. They were briefly they were Webb, Stratner, and Webb,
Yes,
and so they Steve Creech, who I asked you if you knew, you said yeah. They went into his studio,
yes,
which was at that time in Indianapolis somewhere. And,
yes. And Steve was an excellent studio man. He did mastering for people in Nashville.
and I remember you telling me that. So this album got produced but never released. And I don't, and we're not, in talking with Chris, he had a couple reasons why he thought that didn't happen. But the thing of it was, it got produced and then just disappeared. And I found out a few years ago, uh, Scott Millsop was going through materials to send me, and he sent me some discs. Several were Pat's, um, and one of them was it was it was only partially labeled. It had Chris's name, well, it said Teresk, Chris's name, and it said a few short verses. It was almost like they started to label it and then they didn't. So I listened to the link that Scott sent me, which played like 12 tracks. I did not realize at the time until recently that they were pulled from this disc, that's what that was. Only known copy of it that any it's only and he mailed it to me, and so I spent some time with Chris, two different visits, going through this disc, identifying what's on each track, and getting some notes, and then I used a simple template to create the liner notes to go with this disc. Um, and I'm trying to get it pushed out in the world. It really needs to be heard.
I'll
Uh,
tell you what. Let's post that on Acoustic Indiana
okay.
Facebook page, Acoustic Indiana,
Okay.
uh, and let's look for other ways that we can do that. Uh,
Okay.
and you need has Chris signed off on your doing that?
Yeah, he's fine with it. He was glad that I did it because he didn't know that disc existed. You know, it was in a time of his life where he was doing had his group. Well, CJ Watson was part of it, the Beaten Poets.
Yeah,
So this thing just sort of and Pat was probably working on other things. So this thing gets produced and just sort of fell through the cracks.
it's
I don't
beautiful.
know other reasons why, but it's when I put that disc in a CD player and played it, I realized it was that link that Scott had sent me in its entirety. It wasn't just a few short verses, although that does exist on there.
Uh-huh.
Chris, reading some things. So anyway, I packaged this thing up. Eventually, I'll get it added to the Indiana Music History Project after a while, but I'll send you some information, and we'll try to we'll get something on Acoustic Indiana. I think that'd be
Yeah,
good.
make sure. Chris will know how to establish the copyright on it. I don't worry about that about my stuff so much, but you know,
Yeah.
they're
Well,
they're much better musicians.
here's
Or
the
Alan Stratner might help you too.
here's the thing too about copyright. The fact that you have fixed it, you can write it, you know, you can just put it down, record it,
Uh,
whatever it is. It has copyright protection.
Great.
The advantage of doing the long rigmarole of getting it, filed and all that is if somebody did financially benefit from taking it, doing something with it,
Right.
you would have more recourse in court, is my understanding. but I will double check again with Chris.
I wish there was some way of getting that published and up on uh, in some format where Chris could benefit financially from it.
I know, I know,
Uh,
and I have no knowledge of that.
and I would love to. I would love to have Chris comment on it.
Yeah,
I'd love to see Chris writing again. You know, my
well,
son CJ said that he compared Chris's writing to Bob Dylan.
well, I can.
CJ
Well,
was
yeah,
was a good musician and
right.
so
Well, and I may have mentioned this before on here. Chris has had an entire album ready to go. This was in late 2019, early 2020, and he was didn't know him very well, but he was saying, "Hey, help me get this. I want to go out and do some shows."
yeah,
Now, this was before his lungs got so bad, the transverse myelitis hit. Uh, and I really didn't know him very well. I thought, well, how can I help with that? So we're talking about this, and then the next thing you know, it's March of 2020, and nobody's doing anything, playing anywhere. And then his health continued to go downhill. He never, to my knowledge, he had some. I don't think COVID would have done him in, but he didn't. So he didn't. He avoided that. We were careful to get when we got together. He didn't go out much, but that album is still sitting there. But he can't. His hands are too numb with the transverse myelitis to get the thing done. But there's another entire album of. I'm telling you what, CJ was right. And I've got copies of his previous two albums, but this third one would have been just really a premier
yeah,
thing, equally good as the others. But he's just
tremendous talent.
physically unable right
Uh, but God bless you for helping him out.
now. Well, it's been a education and a pleasure. I'm going to get a hold of him after we're done here and see. I just check every week. Hey, how about a visit? And he'll tell me, yep, come on down, or nope, not this week. Just you never know. He never knows. Anyway, so anyway, I'll have some more material I didn't get to today. We'll start off next week. Um, I think are we at the end here?
Yeah, I think so.
Because you got to get okay, and then I'll just pick up with it'll kind of relate to today, but I've got several things that I'll
However it shakes out is
that's right. We
they're not
just
going to cut our pay.
I don't think they will. I haven't feel threatened to be fired yet. So, all right, Frank.
You have a good day, Tom.
Thank you, sir. You do the same.
Bye bye.